But Dr. Brader is on now, so we'll swap over to our talk on whistleblowing and do's and don'ts. Dr. Brader is a founding member of AAEM and Great Lakes Emergency AAEM, excuse me, Great Lakes Academy, American Academy of Emergency Medicine, and has quite a bit of experience with litigation that I will let him discuss, and I'll give a little bit of that background or disclaimer that Dr. Brader is not an attorney, but for somebody who has gone through the system from the emergency medicine side, there are a ton of pearls that I think we can all benefit from. Thanks, Dr. Brader.
Thanks, Mitch. Basically, just to reiterate, the opinions I'm expressing also are not those of my employer, which they want me to say before I go on any sort of speaking engagement. And these are my own opinions. Also, to reiterate, I'm not a lawyer, but I've been, unfortunately, had a lot of legal education, which hasn't been intentional, but it's good to learn from other people's experiences, and I'm going to offer my observations. And you should always, before you consider any of this sort of thing, consult with an attorney. But there are certain things I think you should do prior to consulting with the attorney, because you don't want to step, in the brown stuff and ruin your potential case, ruin your leverage, ruin your ability to make change in our field by virtue of making a misstep. And it's really easy to make a misstep that would cause problems with you going forward. So anyhow, with regard to whistleblowing, there's a lot of different areas of whistleblowing that are important, particularly in emergency medicine. There's quality concerns. With regard to quality concerns, I'll bring up some things that you should know and be aware of. There's also litigation going on with Press-Ganey and how it's being used as a tool inappropriately against emergency physicians and being used to pressure emergency physicians, I believe, to prescribe narcotics in an attempt to raise Press-Ganey scores. And there's a suit going on right now that I'm aware of that alleges this, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes forward. Billing fraud is also another important area in emergency medicine. Our licenses our licenses are being used to bill fraudulently and hide behind, and so there's whistleblowing opportunities for billing fraud, which can be quite fruitful. With regard to many emergency physicians or independent contractors, there's litigation, two kinds of litigation which can occur. One is what is important with regard to obtaining status, and if you're inappropriately fired, you're going to need to prove that you're really not an independent contractor and that you're an employee, because as it stands now, the Affordable Care Act and many state laws don't afford you protections with regard to inappropriate dismissal if you're an independent contractor. So you're going to need to prove that you're an independent contractor to further your case. In addition, there's more and more opportunity for independent contractors to file what are called qui tam lawsuits, which are basically a lot of the CMGs and local tyrants hire their physicians as independent contractors, and this is to avoid their paying their share of taxes. And I'll go through what a qui tam lawsuit is, but unfortunately you can't use qui tam lawsuits with regard to federal taxes, but you can use them with regard to, in more and more states, with regard to your so-called contracted entity who's contracting you, who's really your employer, that they use to avoid workman's comp payments and other state taxes. And there are more and more states that are introducing legislation which will allow you to do this. Also, with regard to workplace issues and workplace safety, there should be no retaliation with regard to that. And with regard to all these issues, there are various statutes of limitations depending on whether it's a federal or state jurisdiction, and you'll need to get in touch with your local employee litigation, workplace litigation expert to determine what your statute of limitations is and how long you have to file a claim or file a suit with regard to if you've been wronged in one of these areas. So I'll work my way through these different areas, but one thing you should think of doing and particularly this is important with regard to emergency medicine, is you're going to run into issues with regard to quality issues relating to different members of the medical staff. And you'll be able to tell right away with regard to how different institutions deal with quality concerns, whether there's a no retaliation policy that's front and center with regard to the institution, or whether they'd rather just brush things under the rug and consider you to be a troublemaker if you bring out quality concerns for your patients. And this is particularly nettlesome for the emergency physician, because if you're in a situation where you've been commoditized, and a lot of administrators want you to be commoditized, that's why they hire CMGs, that's why they hire a local tyrant, because they don't want you to have legs to stand on with regard to quality issues and other issues in the department, or going ahead and doing things that you think are injurious to your patients that an administrator would want you to do. So unlike other physicians who have a practice and could say, well, if I don't like what you're doing, I can take my practice elsewhere, and that would affect your typical administrator / accountant because they see those dollars going away. You don't have the leverage with regard to patients. If you leave institutions, you're not going to be able to take patients with you. Although if you have a good relationship with EMS and EMS medical director, you can take patients with you. Now, actually I've done that in a prior go round, but typically the administrators don't believe that you can pull that off. So if they don't believe what you're holding is a gue and they think it's something else, it won't serve as leverage with regard to your current situation. So, but I've also seen in other similar situations that others have incurred that's been used as a means of getting leverage and being weaponized. So I can talk about that a little bit also. But first of all, with regard to what I call pre-whistleblowing, if you're someone who would be inclined to stand up for your patients and stand up for your specialty and stand up for yourself with regard to patient care, then, in emergency medicine, if you're being viewed as a commodity, you're always taking a risk that you're going to be fired. And emergency physicians, unlike other physicians, I think the firing rate for emergency physicians has to be astronomical with regard to other physicians. So pre-whistleblowing, you need to take into account a few situations. So I had this epiphany and I didn't realize this when I got out of residency. I thought that hospitals, and not all hospitals are the same, but if you look at the percentage of the higher CMGs, the administration, you would think, would be most interested in hiring the best doctors in their emergency department. And it's not true. Their biggest concerns seem to be that your press gainies are good, that your patients per hour are good, and that you get along with the medical staff. And so you never get asked, what was your best resuscitation? What was your best, what was your best diagnosis? They're more concerned about all these other issues. So when you're looking at putting roots down and deciding where you're going to go practice, and now clearly that's more limited with the overproduction of emergency physicians currently. But once I realized this, and as a young physician at the time, I hadn't built my dream house and settled, still renting at that point. I saw the handwriting on the wall. So when I built my dream house, I built it at the confluence, and I live in Western Pennsylvania, just north of Pittsburgh. For those who know the area, I built my house at the confluence of 79 North, 279, which is more of an east-west, northwest route, and the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and was 20 minutes away from the international airport there. Because I know the winds of emergency medicine can change, and CEOs can have 180 different degrees different view of their emergency department, and you can be working in a hospital where the physician is very pro-emergency department, pro-patient, pro-quality, the patient's first, and then they hire a CEO who wants to sweep everything under the rug because it's easier, and then all of a sudden you're placed in a compromised position. They might want to bring in a CMG to get you to do things that you don't want to do. And so so when you settle down, so to speak, you need to take those things into consideration, because if you go and live in a one hospital town and put down roots and there's nothing else around, for what I would consider over an hour drive, and there's no airport nearby so you can do locums, it's going to be really difficult for you to dig your heels in and try and defend your patients and defend your practice and defend your specialty and defend yourself without having to be uprooted and move someplace else. Now, if you're single and don't have roots, that's different. But if you're young and you have a young family and you're putting down roots and you have a big mortgage and you have big debts, then you can see how much leverage the institution will have over you, and you're going to find that you're going to have to move and uproot everything in order to whistleblow. So if you think you're one of the people, and I'm talking more to the young physicians who may be listening, this is certainly something to take into account, before you try and settle into a community. You have to realize also, as an emergency physician, your level of tolerance for perceived misbehavior is much lower also, so that the threshold for getting in a situation is going to be a lot lower. If you argued with another physician for 5 or 10 minutes, emergency physician for 5 or 10 minutes, who's going to see the next patient, well, that wouldn't be tolerated. But two services can argue in many hospitals for hours and hours who's going to take the admission, and that's tolerated completely. So I use that as an example to how to let you know how flammable your career is with regard to going forward, particularly if you're someone who wants to be an advocate. So anyhow, let's see. So anyhow, let's get on to more whistleblowing pre-planning. So you have to take those things into consideration that I just talked about. So if you're in a situation where you're looking at potentially whistleblowing, you need to do the pre-planning of your lily pad. So it's helpful if you're in a community where there's more than one opportunity, which is occurring less and less. If you make yourself a known commodity at another facility, working part-time there, building relations there, so that when the time comes when you whistleblow, and when you whistleblow, you're going to have to leave, and because once you whistleblow, that institution is going to want to destroy you, because you don't have any patients that you can take with you, and they're going to want to make an example of you. So they will personally say that you can get along with anyone. They will try and QA you to death. And, whenever you go to apply for credentials, have you ever been the subject, of a quality assurance finding and all that sort of thing? They're going to try and put black marks all over you. So when you whistleblow, you need to know what your next step is. You need to create a lily pad. And so one way to do this, as I said, is work part-time someplace, build up your relationship there, become a known quantity there, and have everyone know that you're really a good guy. And so when you go about whistleblowing, you can make the jump easily if and when you're fired. And if you're working and most of the time, oftentimes when you whistleblow and you're an institution that doesn't support, being able to freely make quality, issues, and or an institution that's doing billing fraud, certainly they don't want you coming forward and pointing out the billing fraud. You're going to have to leave because in most cases they're going to try and destroy you to make an example of you. But however, it's better if you let them fire you and you already have credentials at another facility, so you don't have to go through a credentialing process to go on full time. And you're already a known quantity there, because you may find yourself to be very, very unemployable if you file your whistleblowing and you don't have a lily pad and they put all these black marks all over you. Whenever you go to apply to a new facility after you become a whistleblower, they always ask you, where's the last place that you worked? And then the admins have that little side conversation about you. And certainly the admin who, from where you're coming from, when they have this private conversation, they're not supposed to do this, but how are you going to prove that they didn't? And you're going to be identified as, a troublemaker. You've sued people. Whenever a patient comes into your emergency department, many hospitals, there's a mark, beside their name or some sort of notification. This person sues people to give you a heads up. Well, the same thing is now you're labeled. You're someone who sues, and they don't want any part of that, because if they have something that they're doing that they think you might not like, they don't want to be sued. They want someone compliant, someone who's going to roll over, and so your opportunities for employment become extremely limited. If you look at other physicians who have been whistleblowers, they have to move, and they have to either they take positions that are far less desirable, that no other physicians want, in order to wait out their time through the legal process. So lily pad planning is extremely important if you're going to whistleblow. Let's see. Now, in preparation for whistleblowing, you need to make copies of evidence and retain evidence. Because if you don't retain evidence at all, it's all hearsay. And if you say they were doing it and they say you don't, and you don't have any evidence, your ability to make claims is extremely limited. So you take evidence and email it from your hospital account to your personal account? No, because anytime you email to something outside the hospital, a red flag goes up. So if all of a sudden you're emailing internal hospital memos to your private email account, that's a huge red flag, and they know that something's up, and you don't want to you want to control the timing of what goes on. So what's the best way, to be able to do this? Well, you can make physical copies. If somebody always sees you at the copying machine copying stuff, you can be ratted out. So if you have a private copying machine, copy your stuff there. If you can retain originals of things, that's great. And you also have your own camera phone that you take pictures of and hold them in your camera phone and print out hard copy. So I would advise you to retain as much evidence as possible. Now, you may contractually be prohibited from doing this or taking these sort of documents with you by your employment contract. However, if you feel this is evidence of criminal activity, and most of the time it is, overbilling, retaliation for quality concern, particularly if it's done in a conspiratorial fashion, like you can tell that they've structured it, that this is the way that they're going to get around whistleblowing statutes and whatnot. Even though and this is my observation, this is not a lawyer's opinion, is that if this is evidence of criminal wrongdoing, you're allowed to preserve evidence of criminal wrongdoing, even if your contract tells you you're not, because no legal contract can tell you to do, civil contract can force you to do illegal acts. And criminal law trumps civil law. So if you've got evidence of criminal wrongdoing and you retain it, what I've observed is the judges are going to be compliant with regard to supporting you, with regard to your retention of these documents, and not find you in breach. Because how else are you going to bring forward things like billing fraud and there's going to be tax fraud things to go forward, demonstrating that you're an employee and not an independent contractor. So, as I said, you're going to need to make copies of this stuff, and to further, and you shouldn't do this if it isn't true, but, and I believe most of this is criminal, that's being done, that, is forcing this whistleblowing, is to get in touch with your state attorney general or the local U.S. attorney, because a lot of this is violation of both federal and state law, whether it's employment law or federal law with the Affordable Care Act, et cetera, and to meet with them and to turn evidence to them, and that helps solidify that your belief is this is evidence of criminal activity. So you would need to talk to your attorney about this, but I think this is potentially fruitful in having the contract enforced against you. Let's see. So if you retain HIPAA type documents, when you save them, you need to save them in a HIPAA compliant fashion, so that, with regard to limited access and having them locked up and that sort of thing, you need to obey HIPAA and not and retain the anonymity and the privacy with regard to documents that you keep. Additionally, when you get the sense that you're being, how should I say this? When they're ramping up to do something illegal that you're involved with, and they call you down and they have this meeting with you, and they don't put a title on it in the calendar. They just want to meet with you and talk about things. Well, you need to go to that meeting, obviously. You need to talk, and you need to be careful. But then innocently after the meeting, and not immediately, give it a little time so there's not a lot of urgency, and just kind of innocently ask a question about the meeting. Now, the reason you do this is to document what the meeting actually entailed, because they'll lie about what the meeting actually was. They, well, we want to talk about the Christmas party. That's what that meeting was about, But if you send that little email that says, I didn't understand this one thing about blah, 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 very innocently, it tags the meeting so that they can't turn around and make up some ridiculous story about, what the meeting was really about. So I would also advise that, and of course, take a picture of that screen. And someone made the point of not to turn your flash off when you do it, which is a great suggestion. Let's see. Okay, so additionally, if you're thinking about whistleblowing, you can't talk to anyone about what you're doing, because even if you think that person is sympathetic, they may be in a position where they have big loans, they have roots put down, they don't have a lily pad, they're willing to, even though they're sympathetic, eat the brown stuff and not stand up and fight. And so if you've been confiding in them, they can be rolled over and testify against you and tell you that, and be forced to say that what you're saying isn't true. And that's very damaging to your case. So, or they can head it off, and for lack of a better term, squealing you that so and so's getting ready to do something. So you can't talk to anyone about it. You just need to, once this becomes apparent, you need to talk, get yourself an employment attorney, or we'll talk about what these key tam lawsuits are about. And there's particular attorneys that go forward with key tam lawsuits, and they will also tell you what you should do, shouldn't do, things that you should try and preserve. And once you file your suit, if you elect to go forward, that's the point. And you've unplugged, you're plugged into your lily pad, and that's the point where you should start talking to people about potentially being witnesses for you. And the best type of witnesses to get would be people who work with you at that time and may have left and gone to another institution, whereupon the old institution has no leverage over them anymore. Because the existing people, no matter how well-meaning they may be, at some point may be forced to buckle. And I've seen potential witnesses retaliated against when they've appeared on a witness list, and that obviously shakes them up, and they may request not to testify on your behalf. So so pick your witnesses carefully. They will also ask you who you've contacted. So I would go down, if in regard to picking your witnesses, pick the people who, like I said, if there are people that are around who they no longer have leverage over, I would go down that list first and see how many people your attorney feels are needed with regard to a witness list. Because you want to contact as few people as possible, because if you contact the wrong person, they're going to tip your hand, and you want to keep the inner circle as small as possible. Okay, so the other thing, and I've talked about this, is so if you're someone who wants to do this, I think the people who are most and best able to do this are people towards the end of a career who have built up, a considerable volume of work, and it's clear and apparent who this person is. It's very hard for someone who's just come out of residency. You don't have any volume of work to say that you're a good egg and that you've done a lot of good things and you've done a lot of right things, and so you're a risk if you file one of these suits. Now, on the other hand, if you haven't put down roots and you don't have a family and you can downsize, and engage in these activities, and you're okay with still living like a resident for a while, and only being able to work part-time, and work at undesirable places, you don't get paid as much, blah blah blah. You can do it, but you better win, and you better have a suit that you can win and win enough money that you don't have to work again, because you're going to be labeled, you're going to be labeled for the rest of your career as that guy. And when emergency physicians are viewed as commodities by administrators, why do you want to take a risk at hiring that guy? Now, if you have a body of professional work behind you, for instance, myself, I'm involved in litigation right now with the CMG, but if you look at my body of work, I did the original cerebral hypothermia benchtop work for therapeutic hypothermia and cardiac arrest. I was one of the original emergency physicians to do ultrasound. I've been an ultrasound program director at 2 places, and I've done over 30,000 emergency department ultrasound studies, echo, soft tissue, transvag in pregnancy. I built the first 24/7 365 EMS2 cath lab for STEMI system in 1996. So I've got all that, and I've never sued any employer or done anything like that. So I've got all that behind me and have a volume of work so that when I litigated, chose to litigate, it was much easier for me to, find a new employer, said, and an employer who was interested in quality, and looked at all that and said, you know what, they must have done something really awful to not have wanted this guy to be part of their program. So I'm not the risk that that I'm not some young hothead that is going to be unhappy everywhere they go. So that made it a lot easier for me to transition to a lily pad. And so physicians, for lack of a better term, who are in that position have a lot easier time of being able to do it. And when you go to do it, for instance, in my situation, I hadn't planned on doing it when I made the transition, but without talking too much about myself, it became apparent that in talking to my employer, that they were going to be supportive of me with regard to me going forward with this. And however, and I want to get established at the new facility also. Like, you think I'm a good egg? I'm not a crazy person. I'm not a hothead. I'm not a bad. I'm not one of these people who goes around suing people left and right, because they may become. You don't want to generate concern at your own institution. You don't want to set fire to your own lily pad. So it's important to have the support of your institution, have being an institution that supports quality, and particularly a physician-led institution, which I'm at right now, that is very front and center with regard to doing quality things. And so I fit right into the culture, and it's made it very easy for me to go forward with with regard to the litigation. And so that's also important, because you don't want to be in a situation where the new institution where you start your litigation, and then my buddy from hospital B, he's my bud, and he's in my ear telling me, watch out for Brader, watch out for Brader, watch out for Brader. That's going to be a difficult situation for you to weather. And how should I say this? You want to be absolutely, when you're at your new institution, you can't raise any concerns about anything while you're there, while this litigation is going on. You have to, for lack of a better term, I think I have a pretty pristine record prior to all this, but I don't want any, I'm not going to do anything crazy, in particular while this litigation's going on. So you need to be especially careful that nothing ends up, getting misconstrued while you're litigating. Let's see. Also, in regard to talking to your employment attorney, the Affordable Care Act says you have 6 months if you're retaliated against to file suit with regard to the provisions of the Affordable Care Act, and that's no employer cannot retaliate against you. So if you're going to another facility, 6 months isn't a very long time to show everyone that that you're a good egg. If you already worked there part-time and they know you're a good egg, and you've been fired as a result of bringing forward quality concerns, and it's if you're going to whistleblow and it's a quality concern, you have to get fired. And so if you're going to get fired, you can't act badly to try and get fired. You just have to bring forward the truth in a very upfront fashion. And if the powers that be at your institution don't want to hear it, and you're a commodity, what often happens with the CMG, and I know I'm rambling a little bit here, and it's a little tangential, but I wanted to bring this in. The parent agreement between a CMG and the healthcare institution they're contracted with has a provision that the CMGs offer that no Democratic group would ever offer. And that would be that CEO can have anyone fired, any physician fired at any time for any reason. So if you're nagging the CEO, he knows that, if he fired you for quality concerns, he'd be in trouble, that you're bringing for quality concerns. But if you work for the CMG and you have this clause in your contract, you can ring up the CMG, and, if they're interested is making money, which if private equity is involved, all they're interested in is making money, they'll fire you, they'll protect the contract. They're not interested in, their prime interest is the contract. So the CEO will point to their contract, I can fire this guy at any time. I can fire this guy at any time. You fire him, and they're going to fire you. So, and that's part of the Achilles heel, I think, of the relationship with CMGs and CEO. Now they fired you, and it's retaliation. So you have 6 months, or they can the new fad is to reassign you. Well, we didn't fire you. You're going to work at Timbuktu and see 10 patients an hour and get paid half of what you're getting paid before. But we didn't fire you. Now, technically, everybody knows that's retaliation, and it's not protected, particularly if they just turn around and hire someone else in your old position. This wasn't any sort of restructuring. This wasn't voluntary. So usually those arguments, from what I've seen, fall through. And so when you get fired, you have 6 months from the Affordable Care Act to file suit for retaliation. But you may have longer, and you need to talk to your employer attorney. Generally, it's 1 or 2 years if, with regard to state law and being retaliated against with regard to bringing up quality concerns or anything else that it's illegal to be retaliated against as far as being an employee. So that can buy you time if you're at a new facility and want to take time to establish yourself and build good relations with your admin there, and lay it on thick and make sure that they know that you're a good guy and or gal, and raise some echoes with that one. But to establish yourself at your new facility, and then go forward with your litigation. Let's see. Okay. So getting back to the employee-employer relationship, if you're an independent contractor, these don't explicitly cover you. Now, this is also being litigated right now, whether independent contractors should be allowed to do this, but it's pretty easy for an emergency physician who work for many of these CMGs to get themselves defined within their suit that they're really an employee, and therefore their contract is subject to the provisions of the Affordable Care Act and to state law. So there are 3 main areas within employment law that govern whether you're truly an independent contractor or whether you're an employee. And there's three elements. And you can look these up. The IRS has a website that lists all this stuff out. And just go to Google search IRS, independent contractor versus employee. And there's 3 main areas. Behavior control. Does the person you're contracting with have the ability to direct and control your work? The degree of instruction that they give you, they want you to do this way, this way, this way, this way, and this way. You're an employee then. Do they have an evaluation system that evaluates facets of your work rather than just the end product? Do they require periodic training? If you're an independent contractor, basically what's supposed to happen, you're supposed to come in and do the job, and they don't have any say over the way you're about to do it. They just can remark about the end product. Also, financial control. Are you paid lump sum or hourly? Well, somebody comes and works in your house, do you pay them hourly? Or do you say, okay, you're going to do my bathroom for blah, blah, blah hours? Well, that person's an independent contractor. How many emergency physician contracts are lump sum? None. So, and as an independent contractor, do they reimburse you for expenses, like an employee would, or are you responsible for all your expenses? Do you supply all of your capital needs? Well, if you work in an emergency department, and are you using their equipment or your equipment? Well, you're far and away, you're using their equipment. So that also points to you being an employee. And finally, the relationship. What does the contract say? If you're an independent contractor, you come and go as you please. They can't schedule you. Is it assumed that you're going to be a permanent? Independent contractors are supposed to come and go, not to have a permanent relationship, with the expectation being that you're going to work there for years and years and years. So if that's the case, you're an employee. And are there employee benefits that you receive as an independent contractor? And so if there's employee benefits, if there's vacation, if there's sick time, all that sort of thing, that all points to you having an actual employee relationship. So with regard to, if you talk to your attorney and you're an independent contractor, you want to make sure that they that they take into account that that part of the suit is going to be that you're really an employee and you're really covered by state employment laws and by the Affordable Care Act. So, so anyhow, with regard to the quality issues, this is key, and with regard to a lot of other issues, this is key. And what else? So I talked about these qui tam lawsuits, and these are can be very potentially fruitful, and unfortunate. Well, basically, what a qui tam lawsuit is you inform the government, particularly with Medicare fraud, that there's a systematic way with regard to how Medicare is being defrauded by an institution. And as an emergency physician, if you're privy to any of this sort of thing, and this is flying under the radar, you can be the whistleblower and file what's called a qui tam lawsuit. And with regard to billing fraud, the government has X amount of time to say, you can go forward and investigate this yourself, with all the rights the government investigator would have, because we just don't have the time or the staff to go forward with this. And whatever you recover in court, you get 30% of what was, quote, stolen from the government. On the other hand, the government may say, you know what, we want this one, and thanks for doing that for us, and you get 10%. So with regard to whistleblowing, with all the nonsense that goes on with having to, signing PA charts of patients you've never seen so that they can bill, the full, completely as if they've been seen by a physician when they really haven't, or all the upcoding and all the surprise billing. If you feel this is being fraudulently done, you can file a qui tam lawsuit. So, and there's particular attorneys that do qui tams, and you want to get an attorney that has done qui tams before. The same thing with the employment law. You want to make sure that they understand healthcare employment. And so in either case, you want to ask them for cases that they've litigated that are similar to yours. And, they can't, if there's been a settlement, they can't specifically tell you the amount of the settlement, but, whether that was, was it positively settled and that sort of thing. So you also want to, for lack of a better term, investigate your attorney before you get involved with one of these things. The person you don't want to talk to is a malpractice defense attorney. And you say, well, you're a physician. They're the ones who are, should have your best interest. Well, back when physicians were truly independent, there were malpractice attorneys that represented physicians, and they understood the sometimes adversarial relationship between the hospital and physician when it came to litigation. Now, 65% of physicians are hospital employees. So the bread is buttered by hospitals now, if you're a physician. So any malpractice defense attorney, the overwhelming majority of business is now hospital driven. So they're not going to do anything on your behalf. In fact, they may squeal on you if you talk to a malpractice defense attorney with regard to any of this type of litigation. So if you're involved with a situation where you need a malpractice, someone who's understands the malpractice game, you know, if you're being retaliated against, for instance, they're going to try and settle a suit against you, which in my case, I wasn't even in the hospital when they said the malpractice was occurred, but they wanted to settle against me. And I won't go too, I can't really go in depth with it at this point. My deposition and my testimony has already been taken, and I stand by it. But if if they're trying to settle against you, you would think that you'd hire your own malpractice defense attorney to defend you. They won't defend you. They'll throw you under the bus because they want the business from the hospital in the future. So who you have to hire is you have to find a medical malpractice litigator, plaintiff's litigator, because they don't care if they piss off the hospitals and the other attorneys. They're not getting business from the hospitals or other physicians. What you do is hire a malpractice plaintiff's litigator to litigate to prevent you from getting thrown under the bus. And if they're going to try, if they're going to try and throw you under the bus, put black marks in your record to make, and get data bank badness on you to, not only teach you a lesson, but see what happened, see what we did to Brader. So you all keep your mouths shut unless you want to end up like Brader. So I had to hire my own malpractice attorney, but he was a plaintiff's litigator. And so that's who you're going to have to hire if you're put in that situation. So I just wanted to give you that pearl. I guess I'm running close to the end of my time. I'm going to try and looking down through chat and see if there's any questions I can answer for people. Let's see. If you need to get in touch with me, the best way is via email. Give me your contact information, and the best email for me is braderwork@aol.com, BRA@AOL.com. Contact information, and depending on volumes and how swamped I am with different things, I will get back to you. If you leave me a couple times to try and get in touch with you, because as I said, it's very complex. It's very easy to step in a place, that, it's, kind of like the old Indiana Jones thing, where he has the questions and you're going to get the Holy Grail. And if you answer the question wrong, you get your head chopped off, or you fall into the bottomless pit or whatever. So there are things you need to know even ahead of contacting an attorney to avoid to maintain your ability to go forward to whistleblow, even if that never occurs. You want to prepare in advance as much as possible for that day if you see it within the range of outcomes. Okay, I'm going to post I'm not a Zoom expert, so I'll post my email. Okay, so
I just put it in the chat. I think it's right. braderwork@aol.com. I just missed a period there.
Okay.
What kind of, so Megan Gaylor says, what kind of lawyer goes after the broken system but not the doc? And I don't know if Bradley Schwartz is on here, our injured patient attorney who was both a defense attorney and a med mal litigator and, you know, kind of outside of the mold of your typical attorney. And he was looking at ways in the back of his mind, just throwing them around of, you know, can you blame the hospital and leave the doc out of it? But I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you shoot me that again?
Megan says, what kind of lawyer goes after the broken system, not the doc? Dr. Gaylor.
Well, it has to be a lawyer who isn't relying on hospital business in healthcare. So it's going to be a litigator. It's going to be a plaintiff's litigator. You know, if you want help from in that sphere, because you know, it's a professional suicide to cross a hospital now. You know, in this area, because if you cross them, you'll never do any business with them again. I don't know if that helped. That answered your question.
Well, it's going to be a rare one then, who's not relying on hospital business. It's just like anyone else, you know.
Oh, it's a plaintiff's counsel, the people who sue hospitals for a living. You know, and the one, you know, they're kind of, you know, there are. I'll be honest, there are ethical ones out there. You know, the one I hired, extremely ethical. His brother's a well-known ENT who I knew for decades. I didn't know his brother was a med mal litigator, but he, you know, in seeing the cases he's taken, you know, the cases he's taken are just, you know, he's well established. He's not on television doing all the stupid ads and that sort of thing. He's like the insider. If you're the insider, you know, he's who insiders go to, you know, to litigate in this area. He doesn't advertise. He's you know, very picky about his client list, and the stuff that he litigates, you know, yeah, I've seen the cases he's litigate are just horrific, you know, things that have done to patients. So he's, so, you know, you don't want to pick a advertising bottom scraper. You know, if you know attorneys, you know, who would you go to? Who's for real good, who's an ethical sort of person. And there's, you know, there are quantities of ethical people who do this without, you know, obviously there's lots of them who aren't, but so that's who I would go to.
Thanks. You know, sorry, I'm just looking at the timing here. I think we're good till 12:30.
Okay. Yeah, if you see any questions,
I see.
Down through.
Yeah, we're good till 12:28. I think we're in pretty good shape because I already did sort of the introduction to the careers. I think let's ask. Maybe we can clear up Dr. Hayes' question, Lindy Hayes, in the comments here. She was asking about, you know, being an employee and a 1099. I think there's some confusion and there's misclassification sometimes, which is what you referred to earlier. So Dr. Hayes said, so facility said we'll pay you as a 1099, but you have an employee contract with the facility in place, which is probably just a confusing terms. I'm not sure if they're using that on purpose, but you're not an employee if you're a...
I don't see how you can be a 1099 at the same time be an employee. I don't think that would hold up but then again, I'm not an attorney, but it would seem to me that you're one or the other. Unless you're, you know, unless, for instance, you're an emergency physician and a plumber, and you come in, you do your emergency physician thing and that, you know, and you're an employee, but then you come in and say, well, you know, I'll fix your toilet for $500, you know, then you could that, you know, but if it's all under the same roof, I don't see how that floats. Now, unfortunately, and I'm hoping the federal government changes this, but you can't, and this, I wanted to bring this up and I forgot. With regard to the independent contractor type issue, and this is in a previous life, but it worked. 30 years ago, I worked for a really sleazy contract group for about 3 years, and they're defunct now, but they just totally abused the contract I was at. 1 month, you know, I was understaffed. There's a 26,000 volume emergency department. They cut back my staffing to single coverage. 26,000 visits a year, single coverage, 12-hour shifts. I worked in one, and I worked in 1 month as a director and the EMS director for the EMS system. I worked 300 clinical hours in 1 month and did these jobs. And I remember one day I had to work a reverse 24-hour shift to make the schedule work from 7 p.m. and work all the way around to 7 p.m. the next day. And so, and I was an independent contractor at that point. So after a couple months of this and seeing that they weren't going to fix things, I said, well, I'm going to resign. But then the hospital told the contract group, if Brader ever leaves, we're going to cancel your contract. And, to a CMG, that's like, oh my God, they're taking away the money. And it's nothing else but the contract and the money. So they threatened me with a lawsuit and said, you are tortuously interfering with our contract by leaving. Now, as an independent contractor, you can come and go as you want. And so they, not only did they do this, so then I did this thing. I called up ASAP. This was 1993. Called up ASAP and said, hey, these guys are threatening me with a lawsuit. All I want to do is leave. What can you help me with? And I got the total BS ASAP line that, well, there are different ways to practice emergency medicine, and we don't get involved with contractual issues, and you just need to find a place that works for you. It's like, I'm an emergency physician. They're not. They're a CMG. What are you going to do for me? And so you got the same BS. Well, about the same time, I got hooked up with Jim Keeney and talked to him and the founders of AEM, and went to the founding meeting where the Constitution was passed and all that sort of stuff. And I sent ASAP. I renounced my fellow status. And then I found out that I wasn't being treated as an independent contractor, and I threatened to turn them into the IRS because I'm an employee, and you'll have to pay back Social Security taxes on me and everyone else in your organization. So I figured that to be, and they can go back as far as 10 years. So you're going to have to pay tens of millions of dollars if I rat you out to Social Security. Now, unfortunately, you can't do a key tam with regard to Social Security taxes and rat them out and get your 30% or your 10%, because for whatever reason, the federal key tam code excludes the IRS. Anything else that the government's being defrauded on, you can file a key tam lawsuit, but there's this carve out for federal taxes. But you can threaten them, and if you go to the website, you can fill out a form that says, I'm not being treated as an independent contractor, I'm being treated as an employee, but you may want to talk to your employment attorney if you're going to whistleblow and you've been retaliated against, and that may be part of your strategy to illustrate that you are a employee, not an independent contractor.
All right, so Dr. Brader, thank you for your time there. There are a couple of questions that I wish we had a little earlier on into that, because we're out of time now. I'm wondering, it might be possible, Diana, and maybe if Lucas can help out in real time, maybe we can create another breakout room with Dr. Brader if he's around, because I feel like there are real questions that could be done. Is that something that, Eric, is that a possibility? That
I'm clinical. I'm clinical too, so I can stick around for a little while. Although
1:30 p.m. we're starting that. We're starting the breakout groups. So
okay. I'm clinical. I'm clinical. I'm Eastern Standard Time, 2 p.m. on, unfortunately,
Eastern.
Yeah, I'm Eastern. So but feel free to email me. Your contact information. I'll touch base with you, and any observations I can offer you. Remember, I'm not an attorney. This should not be, it's like a commercial. This should not be construed as legal advice. But it's my observations, and it's informational that may be helpful to you.
Eric, it sounds like we have some volunteers to kind of go like 5 minutes into the next. Our next session is going to be a little rapid fire things, and they're going to be pitching for longer breakout sessions. So we might have, let's give it 5 minutes if we want to have Eric let's just have Brad. Thanks, guys, for volunteering that. Let's have Brad ask his question, and in the context of Kate G's question there, wondering about just even speaking about these issues as being retaliated against. Brad, go ahead.
Thank you very much. So last year, I ended up writing a New York Times op-ed, which kind of lit a huge fire and tons of media attention. One of the first things I did was reach out to an employment attorney. And I wanted to bounce his input off of you because it's worked for me. But my understanding is, as long as you understand the brand is holy, so don't mess with your brand and don't get involved in politics. And this is right before the 2020 election. And so I was being asked to speak on in all these political ways. And as long as I didn't use 45's name and didn't take sides in a partisan way, and as long as I didn't mention my employer's name, I could talk about the broken models, I could talk about the problems, etc., which strikes me as that's what we've been doing here. There's only been a couple organization names dropped, but do you have any additional insight from a whistleblower perspective?
Well, yeah, I think you want to remain focused, and anything that you bring forward, if you're going to whistleblow, and I would say, for the sake of our specialty, to go through it all the way. Once the horse is out of the barn, for lack of a better term, you're a sewer. So you're, S-U-E-R, but to the administrators, it could be S-E-W-E-R. But so two things. One, if you end up settling, then the whole settlement thing, it becomes confidential, and you can't talk about the abuses afterwards, and you can't get things fixed. So if you're really interested in doing the right thing, don't settle. Take it all the way through the legal process, and then they can't gag you with a settlement agreement. So that's the best way there to achieve change. And two, you want to maintain narrow focus in the public sphere, because there's going to be 12 people on a jury. And there's going to be right-wing people, there's going to be left-wing people, and as polarized as politics are right now, you don't want to step on either side's third rail. So in your public, declarations, I think it's particularly, looking forward to, having a jury. You want this to be an ecumenical issue, that you want your emergency physician, one, to be the best quality in your area that your hospital can have, because people can't choose who they're going to see in an emergency. You want your hospital 24/7 staff with the best possible people. And two, you want them to freely be able to, in these serious and time-dependent illnesses, to be your advocate. You want them to be able to stand and fight. If you think they need to go to the cath lab at 2 o'clock in the morning, you need to be able to have at it with a cardiologist and dig in your heels without, the threat of you being fired, even when you're right. People are being threatened even when they're right. Well, you just didn't talk to him the right way. This person's having a STEMI. This person's is going to have their life ruined. They could die, and this is a time-dependent illness, and now's not the time. How can you be an advocate? How can you be an advocate? We know our emergency departments are overrun right now, and how can you be an advocate if you're commoditized and contractually prevented from being able to dig your heels in and fight for your patients and for your specialty? And I think that rings across right and left wing and is something that everyone can get behind. And if you keep it framed in that manner, which is just only the right thing to do, I think from a tactical standpoint with regard to a jury, that's the way to go. Did that sort of answer?
I think the clapping thing says yes.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
But let's use the next minute. I think we just kind of gained 10 minutes total. I do want to address Kate G. I think that's Dr. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Gad, you can help us out.
Get switch.
Get switch. There we go.
Yeah.
If you want to relay your concerns, because I think they're echoed all over the place, which is people are afraid to even join the Facebook group.
Exactly. I mean, I understand there's that point at which, I think whistleblower is a whole kind of other level. And I think that, at least for me, I know in my colleagues, it's this like minor things of raising your voice against sort of what you're seeing as that creep towards the corporatization. And there's an intimidation factor. I know at my institution, it's very clear that when you raise concerns about things like this, I raised my concern about a new NP fellowship program. I mean, and then I was told by other friends in administration, Kate, you need to stop doing that. And it's sort of like this, I'm not going to say anything specific, but you should tone it down, and colleagues are afraid to even really talk about these things because there is this in feeling of, okay, what's going to happen to me and what are they going to do to me?
Well, I agree with you completely. And as an emergency physician, you're the most vulnerable because you don't have a practice and your patients won't follow you. And if you're at the typical hospital where an accountant, the administrators have an accountant's viewpoint, then it's going to be hard for you to dig in your heels. I would also, you don't know how this thing's going to spin. If you're going to continue to do this and voice concerns, I would send the innocent documenting email out, like, thanks for talking to me last week about blah, blah, blah. And, is there any way which I can address this? And so then if push comes to shove and you ever end up in litigation and you take a picture of your email, that's what this meeting was really about. And these people were telling me to shut up, and really they shouldn't be telling you to shut up. You want to have a discourse now, as long as you're being professional and you're not disruptive. I think the Affordable Care Act's clear that you should be able to voice an opinion with regard to to quality issues, and so you should be I would tell any emergency physician, because you're particularly vulnerable. And I just get the sense that, from certain admins that, they almost like to shoot they can't shoot some physicians, but they can always shoot an emergency physician. So it's almost like if, you need to have that day where you have to, hit the punching bag or something, let's round up the usual suspects sort of thing, that you can always, particularly if you have a CMG contract agreement, you can always take it out. You can always shoot an emergency physician to make an example. Like, say there are other physicians who have practices at your institution that are voicing similar concerns. Well, who are they going to shoot? The guy with the big primary care practice? No, shoot the emergency physician, and then maybe these other guys will shut up. So, I've witnessed that concern also, that they haul us out first to make an example of us to get other people to toe the line. Awful.
Thanks, Dr. Ritter. I really appreciate you being here, and thanks for jumping in right before you go to see patients, because we're all still trying to do that. And you have shown that, how do you walk that line where you still have a gainful employment, because we're vulnerable in emergency medicine. And I think you brought up a great point that will also transition here a little bit. I mean, I have an interesting lily pad. I've been obviously somebody who's been speaking out, similar to what Dr. Gaswich said, which is I haven't issued a lawsuit, but I'm still speaking out to the point where I'm sure I'm a pariah amongst, all of ACE.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And what you're doing is extremely brave and is noteworthy for our profession. And I'm looking at you. You don't look real old. You don't look like a paleo emergency physician like myself. But you've. I hope people appreciate what you're doing at your stage in the career, because it's much appreciated and very Very, very courageous.
Private equity has aged me, so I know I don't. I'm a PGY too. Thanks again.